Kevin had always been a small-time thief, lurking in the shadows of New York City's subway stations. He never went for anything big, just wallets, phones, the occasional purse. It was easy money, and no one ever really chased after him. Tonight was no different. The train station at Times Square was packed, just the way he liked it. Crowds meant distractions. His eyes darted through the sea of people, searching for an easy target. That's when he spotted her, a fragile-looking elderly woman, barely 5 feet tall, hunched over a large brown leather bag. She was the perfect mark. Kevin smirked to himself. He had done this 1,000 times. He just needed to get close, time it right, and... "Excuse me, young man." Kevin froze. The old woman was looking right at him, her piercing blue eyes cutting through his confidence like a knife. "Would you be a dear and help me with my bag?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Kevin hesitated. He wasn't used to his targets talking to him first. He considered just walking away, but the weight of his empty pockets held him back. Sure," he muttered. As he reached for the bag, a deep, unmistakable voice rumbled behind him. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Kevin turned slowly, his stomach tightening. And there he was. At first, Kevin thought he was looking at a statue. The man standing before him was massive, like a human boulder sculpted from pure muscle. His head was shaven, his jawline sharp enough to cut steel, and his black t-shirt stretched tight over his chest. Dwayne. Freaking. Johnson. Kevin felt his throat go dry. The Rock stared down at him, arms crossed, eyebrows slightly raised in that signature way that sent shivers down spines worldwide. "Let me guess," Dwayne said. "You were about to do something stupid?" Kevin's heart pounded. He glanced at the old woman, then back at the Rock. His mind raced for an excuse, but nothing came out. No?" The Rock sighed, shaking his head. "Man, come on. I've seen that look before. You're not fooling anybody." Kevin's instincts screamed at him to run, but something about the Rock's presence kept him frozen. He wasn't just a celebrity, he was Dwayne Johnson, a man who could probably bench press a subway train if he wanted to. The old woman chuckled. "I told you, Mr. Johnson, that someone would try tonight." Kevin's eyes widened. She knows him? The Rock turned to her. "You called it, Mrs. Donovan." "I should have bet on it." Mrs. Donovan smiled sweetly. "Oh, I know a thief when I see one." Kevin felt himself shrink under her gaze. "Look, man, I wasn't gonna." The Rock held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." Kevin knew he was trapped. Running wasn't an option, not with the Rock standing there. But to his surprise, Dwayne didn't grab him or call the cops. Instead, he motioned toward a nearby bench. "Sit." Kevin hesitated. "Dude, just sit." Not knowing what else to do, Kevin obeyed. Mrs. Donovan took a seat beside him, her hands resting calmly on her bag. The Rock sat across from them, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "All right," he said. "Let's talk." Kevin frowned. "Talk? About what?" The Rock shrugged. "About why you thought robbing a little old lady in a subway station was a good idea." Kevin scoffed. "I dunno, man. Maybe 'cause I don't have $1 million Hollywood career?" Dwayne smirked. "Yeah. And whose fault is that?" Kevin clenched his jaw. He didn't like being lectured, especially by someone who had everything. "You don't know what it's like. I grew up with nothing, all right?" You think I want to do this? Mrs. Donovan patted his knee. Dear, I've lived long enough to know that choices define people. You might not have had control over where you started, but you sure as hell control where you end up. Kevin looked away. The Rock leaned closer. Listen, man. I get it. I really do. I didn't grow up rich either. You think I just woke up one day and had all this? He gestured to himself. Nah. I worked my ass off. You can too. Kevin scoffed. Yeah, sure. Let me just go become a movie star real quick. The Rock laughed. Maybe not a movie star. But you can do better than this. If you put as much effort into a real hustle as you do into stealing, who knows where you'd be? Kevin didn't respond. Mrs. Donovan smiled. You know, young man, when I was your age, I made some bad choices too. But someone took a chance on me. Maybe you just need someone to take a chance on you. Kevin looked at her, then at the Rock. Why do you even care? He muttered. DWAYNE leaned back. Because I've seen too many guys like you throw their lives away. And because, believe it or not, I used to be you. Kevin frowned. What? The Rock nodded. When I was 15, I got arrested for theft. I was on a bad path. But somebody pulled me aside, just like I'm doing for you now. They told me I had a choice. So I made one. Kevin swallowed hard. So, the Rock continued, I'm giving you the same choice. You can walk away right now, go back to stealing, and end up either in jail or worse. Or, you can make a different choice. Kevin hesitated. Like what? The Rock pulled a business card from his pocket. I've got a buddy who runs a gym in Brooklyn. He helps guys like you get back on track. Teaches them discipline, gives them a place to work. If you're serious about changing, I can make a call. Kevin stared at the card. His fingers twitched. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. The easy choice was to laugh it off, walk away, and go back to what he knew. But for the first time in years, another option was in front of him. And this time, he wasn't sure he wanted to walk away. Kevin exhaled slowly and reached for the card. All right. The Rock grinned. Good choice. Mrs. Donovan patted his arm. I knew you had it in you. Kevin looked between them. But, what if I screw up? The Rock chuckled. Then you get back up and try again. That's life, man. Kevin nodded. As the subway train screeched into the station, he knew one thing for sure. Tonight wasn't just another night. Tonight was the night everything changed. Kevin stood at the entrance of Ironwool Gym, staring at the bold red letters on the glass door. It had been 3 days since his encounter with Dwayne Johnson in the subway, and the business card in his pocket felt heavier than it should. He wasn't sure why he had come. Part of him still thought it was a joke. The Rock probably handed out those cards all the time to lost souls like him. Did he even remember Kevin? With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The smell of sweat and rubber hit him immediately. The place wasn't fancy, concrete floors, metal weights clanking, punching bags swinging. But there was something about it, something real. A bald man in his 50s, built like a tank, was wrapping a young guy's hands near the boxing ring. He looked up as Kevin hesitated in the doorway. You lost, kid? Kevin shook his head and pulled the card from his pocket. Dwayne Johnson told me to come here. The man raised an eyebrow, took the card, and smirked. The Rock sent you, huh? Kevin nodded. The man let out a deep chuckle and extended a calloused hand. Name's Ray Carter. I run this place. If DWAYNE vouched for you, that means you're worth something. You got a name? Kevin. Ray nodded. All right, Kevin. You ever thrown a real punch before? Kevin shrugged. I mean, I've been in fights. Ray smirked. Yeah, I bet. All right, let's see what you got. 30 minutes later, Kevin was already regretting his life choices. His arms ached, his legs felt like jelly, and every punch he threw landed with the force of a damp sponge. Ray circled him in the boxing ring, shaking his head. You punch like a librarian. Kevin groaned, wiping sweat from his forehead. Man, I don't know if this is for me. Ray leaned against the ropes. You think The Rock handed you that card just for fun? He saw something in you, kid. Now the question is, are you gonna prove him right or waste the chance? Kevin clenched his jaw. He hated being called out. But deep down, he knew Ray was right. Taking a deep breath, he reset his stance. Ray nodded. Good. Now try again. 2 weeks later, Kevin's hands were wrapped tight in white tape, his muscles sore but stronger. He was training every day, pushing himself harder than he ever had. One evening, as he was cooling down, Ray tossed him a phone. Someone wants to talk to you. Kevin raised an eyebrow and put the phone to his ear. Hello? A familiar deep voice rumbled through the speaker. Kevin! My man! How's it going? Kevin blinked. DWAYNE? The Rock chuckled. He remembered my name. That's progress. Ray says you've been putting in the work. Kevin glanced at Ray, who smirked. Yeah. I guess, Kevin said. Guess? DWAYNE laughed. Man, if Ray's impressed, you're doing more than guessing. So tell me, how's it feel to be on the right side of a fight? Kevin hesitated. It's different. I thought I'd hate it. But I don't. The Rock's voice softened. That's 'cause you're built for more than running from subway cops, Kev. Kevin exhaled. He had spent years thinking he was nothing more than a thief, but now. Listen, DWAYNE continued. I got a friend who's looking for young guys to train for amateur fights. Nothing crazy, just something to keep you focused. If you're interested, I can put in a word. Kevin's stomach twisted. Fights? Like, real fights? Why? He asked. Why are you helping me? There was a pause. Because someone once helped me, too. Kevin swallowed. He looked around the gym, at the guys training, at Ray watching him, at the life he was starting to build. All right, he said. I'm in. DWAYNE laughed. That's what I like to hear. Kevin didn't know what was ahead. But for the first time in years, he was ready to find out. 2 months passed. Kevin wasn't just training anymore, he was transforming. His punches were sharper, his reflexes quicker, his body stronger. Ray pushed him harder than anyone ever had, but Kevin didn't complain. For the first time in his life, he had a purpose. Then came the real test. You're fighting next weekend, Ray told him one night after training. Kevin froze mid-rap. Wait. What? Ray smirked. You heard me. Amateur circuit. 3 rounds. Nothing crazy, but it'll show me if you're serious. Kevin swallowed hard. He had been in street fights before, but this was different. This was official. No running, no cheap shots, no escape. What if I lose? He muttered. Ray shrugged. Then you get back up. Kevin exhaled. He had come too far to back out now. I'm in. The gym was packed. Kevin's hands were wrapped tight, his heart pounding like a drum. Across from him in the ring stood his opponent, Marcus the Machine Lopez, a scrappy fighter with 6 amateur bouts under his belt. Ray leaned in. Stay on your feet. Use your jab. And for the love of God, don't drop your hands. Kevin nodded. The bell rang. Round 1 was brutal. Marcus came out fast, throwing sharp punches that rocked Kevin early. But Kevin held his ground, dodging and countering when he could. By round 2, something changed. Kevin wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. His punches landed clean, his footwork sharper. Then, in round 3, it happened. Marcus swung wide. Kevin slipped the punch and countered with a clean right hook. Marcus staggered. Kevin threw another. Marcus went down. The ref counted. The crowd roared. Kevin had won. Later that night, Kevin sat outside the gym, staring at his bruised hands. He had done it. His phone buzzed. Yo, champ! DWAYNE's voice boomed. Kevin grinned. You heard? Heard? Man, I saw. Ray sent me the footage. That hook? Beautiful. Kevin laughed. Didn't think I had it in me. I did, DWAYNE said. And now, so do you. Kevin looked up at the city skyline. He wasn't a thief anymore. He wasn't running. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something real. And this? This was just the beginning. Kevin sat in the locker room, still feeling the adrenaline rush from his first real fight. His knuckles ached, his ribs were sore, but none of that mattered. He had won. He had won. Ray walked in, clapping his hands. Not bad, kid. You actually listen. Kevin smirked. Only when it keeps me from getting my face smashed in. Ray chuckled. That's a good reason. He handed Kevin a towel. So, how's it feel? Kevin exhaled, wiping the sweat from his face. Feels different. Like I finally did something that matters. Ray nodded. Good. Hold on to that. First win is special. But now comes the hard part, proving it wasn't a fluke. Kevin's stomach tightened. You think I got lucky? Ray shook his head. No. But the fight game ain't about one win. It's about consistency. You wanna be great? You gotta stay hungry. Kevin sat with that for a moment. For years, he had been hungry, but for the wrong things. Maybe this was his chance to change that. Ray stood up. Take the weekend off. Monday, we get back to work. Kevin grinned. Can't wait. The next day, Kevin was walking home when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Well. Look who's a tough guy now. Kevin turned. It was Richie. Richie had been his partner in crime back in his pickpocketing days. Tall, wiry, and always looking for trouble, Richie wasn't just a thief, he was the type who enjoyed it. Kevin tensed. What do you want? Richie smirked. I heard you've been playing boxer. Kevin crossed his arms. And? Richie stepped closer. And I think you forgot where you came from. Kevin clenched his jaw. Nah, man. I just decided to be more than some subway punk. Richie laughed. Oh, so you think you're better than me now? Kevin shook his head. I think I'm better than who I used to be. Richie's smile faded. You gonna keep fighting, Kev? You think that's gonna save you? He leaned in. Guys like us don't get happy endings. Kevin exhaled. Maybe. But I'm at least gonna try. Richie shook his head. You'll be back. You always come back. Kevin didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just fighting in the ring, he was fighting for his future. And he wasn't about to let the past win. Weeks turned into months. Kevin fought in small tournaments, winning some, losing some, but always learning. Ray pushed him harder than ever. Footwork drills, endless sparring, strength training, every day was a test. Then, one evening, Ray dropped a bombshell. You're fighting in the city open. Kevin blinked. The what? Ray grinned. Biggest amateur tournament in the city. Real competition. Real scouts watching. Kevin's heart pounded. This was huge. You think I'm ready? Ray smirked. Guess we'll find out. A week before the tournament, Kevin was warming up when Ray called him over. You got a visitor. Kevin frowned and turned. And there he was. DWAYNE. Freaking Johnson. Kevin's jaw dropped. Yo, what? The Rock grinned. You didn't think I'd let my guy go into the biggest fight of his life without some extra motivation, did you? Kevin shook his head. What? The Rock laughed. Breathe, man. Kevin finally snapped out of it. What are you doing here? DWAYNE crossed his arms. Ray tells me you've been putting in work. Figured I'd come see for myself. Kevin grinned. You wanna spar? DWAYNE raised an eyebrow. You trying to survive or win a fight next week? Kevin laughed. Fair. The Rock patted his shoulder. Listen, man. You've come a long way. No matter what happens in that tournament, you already won the biggest fight, choosing this life instead of the one you left behind. Kevin swallowed hard. He had spent so much time worrying about proving himself that he never stopped to see how far he'd come. DWAYNE smiled. Now go make me proud. Kevin nodded. I will. The night of the tournament was electric. The crowd was bigger than anything Kevin had ever seen. His opponent? A powerhouse named Damian Cruz, fast, brutal, undefeated. Kevin stood in the ring, heart pounding. The bell rang. Damian came out swinging. Kevin dodged, countered, took hits, gave them back. Round after round. By the third round, they were both battered. Kevin's face was swollen, Damian's eye was cut. Final moments. Damian threw a right hook, Kevin slipped it. And landed a perfect uppercut. Damian hit the mat. The ref counted. The crowd erupted. Kevin had done it. Back in the locker room, Kevin sat with his trophy in hand when his phone buzzed. A text from DWAYNE. Told you you had it in you. Now keep going. Kevin smiled. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he was headed. And he was never looking back. Kevin was still riding the high of his City Open victory when Ray walked into the locker room, phone in hand. "You got people talking, kid," Ray said with a smirk. Kevin wiped sweat from his face. "Yeah." Ray tossed the phone to him. "See for yourself." Kevin looked at the screen. It was a message from Javier Vega, a well-known boxing coach who trains some of the best fighters in the country. "Saw your fight. Impressive. Let's talk." Kevin's heart pounded. Vega was the guy. Fighters under his wing went pro. "This real?" Kevin asked. Ray chuckled. "You think I'd mess with you about something like this?" Kevin stared at the message. This was it. The next level. The chance to go beyond just surviving fights. He could be somebody. Kevin exhaled and typed back. "I'm in." Javier Vega's gym in Brooklyn was nothing like Iron Will. The fighters here weren't just hungry, they were ravenous. Kevin had barely stepped in when Vega himself walked up. A man in his late 40s, lean but strong, eyes sharp as knives. "You the kid who put Cruz to sleep?" Vega asked. Kevin nodded. Vega studied him. "Heard you got power. Let's see if you got brains." Training under Vega was brutal. The workouts made Ray's training look like a warm-up. The sparring partners were faster, stronger, and more experienced. Kevin took beatings. But he kept getting back up. And after 2 months, Vega finally nodded. "You got something, kid." One night after training, Kevin was walking home when he saw a familiar figure waiting outside his building. "Richie." Kevin tensed. "What do you want?" Richie smirked. "Man, you really went soft, huh?" Kevin crossed his arms. "Nah. Just moved on." Richie's smirk faded. "You think these people give a damn about you? The second you lose, you're nothing to them." Kevin exhaled. "Yeah. Maybe. But at least I'm not running from cops every night." Richie chuckled. "You'll come back." Kevin shook his head. "Not this time." And for the first time, he truly believed it. 3 months later, Kevin was finishing up a sparring session when Vega called him over. "You ready for the big leagues?" Kevin frowned. "What do you mean?" Vega handed him a contract. "A professional fight." Kevin's heart stopped. "You win this," Vega said, "you start making real money." Kevin took a deep breath. He thought back to that night in the subway, the night he tried to rob the wrong person. The night Dwayne Johnson changed his life. Now, he had a shot at something real. Kevin looked at Vega. "I'm ready." And this time, he wasn't just saying it. He meant it. The venue was massive. Thousands of people filled the seats, the bright arena lights beaming down on the ring. Kevin stood backstage, hands wrapped, bouncing on his feet to keep his nerves in check. This wasn't just another amateur fight. This was his pro debut. His opponent? Carlos El Tormenta Ruiz, a 10-1 fighter known for his speed and devastating left hook. Kevin exhaled. "You got this," Vega said, standing beside him. "You've trained for this. You've bled for this. Now go out there and take what's yours." Kevin nodded, heart pounding. This was everything. Then, his phone buzzed. A message from Dwayne Johnson. "No matter what happens tonight, remember, you're not that kid in the subway anymore. You're a fighter. Now go show the world." Kevin grinned. The announcer called his name. The crowd roared. He stepped out into the lights. This was his moment. The bell rang. Carlos came out aggressive, throwing fast jabs, testing Kevin's defense. Kevin kept his guard tight, moving, feeling him out. Then, a right hook. Kevin barely dodged it, but he felt the wind rush past his face. Carlos was fast. Round 1 ended with Kevin playing it safe. Vega shook his head in the corner. You wait too long, you'll lose. Go get him. Round 2, Kevin came alive. He slipped inside, landed a clean body shot. Carlos flinched. Kevin pressed forward. A jab. A cross. A hook. Carlos stumbled. The crowd exploded. Round 3, Carlos fought back hard. Kevin took hits. His ribs burned. But he refused to fall. Final round. Kevin feinted left, Carlos reacted. That was the mistake. Kevin threw an uppercut. Crack. Carlos went down. The ref started counting. Kevin's heart pounded. 6. 7. 8. Carlos didn't move. The ref waved it off. Kevin had won. Backstage, Kevin sat with his hands on his head, breathing heavy. He had done it. Vega clapped him on the back. Welcome to the big leagues, kid. Kevin grinned. Then, his phone buzzed. A video call from Dwayne Johnson. Kevin picked up. The Rock grinned. I saw that knockout, man. That was legendary. Kevin laughed, still trying to process everything. You proud? He asked. Dwayne's smile softened. Kevin, I've been proud since the moment you decided to fight for something bigger than yourself. Kevin exhaled, looking at his bruised hands. This was just the beginning. And he was ready for whatever came next.